what came out 3 days ago was that Rahm Emanuel, Chicago, under Rahm Emanuel, has launched this initiative to basically withhold people's diplomas, high school students' diplomas, if they don't have a job or college acceptance letter at the time of graduation. So in order to actually graduate from high school, and this is all framed under the idea like, well, we're trying to build real citizens and public engagement and all these sort of lofty liberal ideals, but really what it comes across is, well, it comes across a lot of ways. It comes across that way initially, but when you realize that Chicago has one of the most underfunded, poverty destroyed school systems, like they're struggling to keep doors open in Chicago right now. School doors open, like they're struggling to fund their community colleges. They're struggling to pay for counselors at these schools. And Rahm Emanuel is saying, oh, well, you won't be able to get your you won't be able to get your high school diploma if you can't demonstrate that you're ready to move on to the next step of your life, because we want you to be thinking about that. But for the vast majority, for a large portion of these students, specifically students of color and students from poor neighborhoods, they just don't have the access to the resources, and if they do, they don't have the access to the that means like their lives are in some ways wrought with stress by their material circumstances, that trying to think that far ahead, or that extra pressure in terms of graduation, is not actually going to help them, right?
The problem wasn't that wasn't a requirement for graduating. That was definitely not the problem with the Chicago education system.
The other problem with that whole thing was the military aspect of it.
It's a poverty draft.
Right, it's a poverty draft. That's exactly right. They're literally accepting an acceptance letter into the military as a way for you to get your degree. I mean, with what's going on and what we know, they're pushing for regime change in Iran and Syria, and also possibly other places around the globe. And we're going to have a long, drawn-out war, and this, to me, sounds like one of the first steps towards making sure we have the armed forces ready to do it.
But here's the thing, and I don't remember, Brandon, if you also went to an underserved school. I know Richard did, but going to an underserved high school, like, had this been a requirement for graduation here up in Tacoma, I wouldn't have graduated. I would not have been able to graduate high school had it been a requirement of either join the military. I did not want to find a job. There's not jobs in poverty-stricken areas like Tacoma. Like, it's hollowed out. It's being gentrified. There's not jobs for people right out of high school. And I wouldn't have been able to get into college, because when you go to these underserved schools, I don't remember one time sitting down and having counselors come to the class and be like, okay, here's how you fill out a college application. Asking students, where are you interested in going to school? What do you want to study? X, Y, and Z, all these other things that I'm seeing happen to some of my siblings, one of my siblings, who does go to a high school in a more affluent area, where they sat you down as a freshman and said, where do you want to go to college? What do you want to study in college? X, Y, and Z. That right there makes a huge difference in whether or not someone goes to college. I left high school not knowing how to apply. I left high school not even knowing that there was financial aid. I did not know what the Pell Grant or FAFSA was until my last 2 weeks of senior year, when my AP teacher pulled me aside and said, hey, did you know that you could go to college and get grants? Like, if you don't, there's no support system. There's nothing there to help these students. So all it's really going to do is it's going to drive up military enlistment rates. It's going to drive dropout rates. It's going to drive up violence. More people are going to turn to gangs and selling drugs, because that's what they have.
The issue for me is that metrics are like, extra metrics are a poor substitution for actual education reform, and that's the problem. Like at this point, we have extra metrics, extra criteria for success, being used as a way to replace actual education reform. And by education reform, I don't mean adding more books to schools. I mean like a huge bucket of reforms that take place in not only the schools in their individual buildings, but also like the communities. Right, so I'm talking about expanded Medicaid, expanding Medicare, like all housing security programs, social security programs, all of the social safety net. But functionally, what we're getting instead, this all comes after Rahm Emanuel is not paying teachers. Like, pay your teachers, Rahm. Pay your fucking teachers, Rahm. He's closing schools, and that's another one of my fears about this. Like, this idea that this will be a way to this will be another way to determine whether or not a school district or individual school is failing, because
it absolutely will be.
Yeah, and therefore a justification to close them and build more stadiums, right? But they said this is the poverty draft. This is the way, because like ultimately the options for how you get your diploma are you can go to college or community college, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Chicago does have tuition assistance for basically you get guaranteed admission to community college, and I believe it's free if you graduate with a B average in Chicago, free-ish to go to community college. Problem with that is that you don't need a B to graduate. So even if it is free, like that creates this gap, right? Like, where you earn your diploma for high school, yet you don't quite make to the point where you get free college, you get free community college. So you can't pay for it, which adds extra stress to your life. And it's this thin veneer of making actual changes and improvements to a system, when really the Chicago, CPS, the Chicago public school system, it's just incredibly mismanaged. The money's just been mismanaged for the past decade and a half.
And I know in my particular school that a lot of the kids that were graduating, even with good grades, B averages or better from the high school, were still not qualifying for college level courses when they went to the community college. And so
Yes. Holy shit. Yes. Can we, and that's something I definitely want to talk about. That goes to your point, Brandon, as to paying teachers and reducing fucking class sizes. Do you know what the achievement gap is for students leaving underserved areas, for leaving urban areas, going to college and trying to do college level work? You know how many people I've seen? And so I'm going to get personal for a minute, folks. You can get mad at me, so I'm trying to make this about me. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell this story. I graduated from a
personal story today. I mean, you don't need to overshare, but go ahead. I'm just kidding.
But I'm not going to overshare. But here's the point. It speaks to what we're going through. I went to an underserved high school. We graduated 48% of people across five high schools, something like 10,000 students. 48% of them graduated the year I graduated. Most of those students, of those students, I can think of 5 from my high school that have college diplomas right now. Going to community college, sitting in class with these people, you know how many of them did not qualify for college level English or math? None of them even had to take remedial reading because their reading level was so poor that they could not function at a college level. So not only are you saying, hey, we're going to throw these extra requirements at you to graduate, but if you do graduate and you don't have the skills to succeed at college, then you just end up in debt. Because the people that we're seeing that end up in the most trouble with college loan debt are people that are unable to finish their degree, people that are not successful in college. So if the entire point of this high school career that they have right now is to shuttle them into the military, if someone for some reason manages to make it to college, then they just get caught up in this Ponzi scheme that is college debt right now. There is no help. We have to, like Brandon said, we have to pay our teachers. We have to reduce class sizes. We have to make it so that way the education system is student focused and not profit focused. We have to stop closing down schools. Like that's not helpful. Like all this is like I said earlier, it's a poverty draft, but it's also it's absolutely a direct result of white supremacy. You're seeing this take place in Chicago, in an area where they're saying, well, there's so much violence. We need to curb the violence. We need to stop the violence. How do you stop violence? You get people in fucking school. Chicago in school.
Chicago is not even that violent though. Like if you compare Chicago to Chicago, I want to say Chicago, and this is something I should probably look up before I say, but Chicago's not in the top 10 most violent cities in America. Like what Chicago is.
I'm going to look that up right now.
I think it's outside of the top 5 at least. But this came up with Rahm talking trash about your guys' subway system over in New York.
And this came up with people with Trump threatening to send the military to Chicago in order to stunt down on violence. It's like, well, Chicago is not even as violent as I want to say Little Rock, Arkansas is in terms of like crime and some of these other places. What Chicago
I think it depends on where you're at. It's because like Chicago's violence it's in the South Side. It's in the black neighborhoods. It's in the areas where these policies are going to affect the most people.
Well, I want to say with more like Chicago is what Chicago does have though is the vibrant black radical initiative. Like that's what Chicago does have. Like Chicago has a lot of black organizing. I think Chicago is an urban area that has a lot of black urban elite. Like that is what Chicago has, and there's definitely a violence problem there. It's just not the most violent city. But the problem, but again, this comes down to an issue with urban centers, that there's this huge discrepancy between the rich areas of Chicago and the poor areas of Chicago. And while this might seem like a good idea theoretically, it speaks to the Democratic Party's priorities, which is like these shallow metric-based, means testing-based solutions to problems, as opposed to actually dealing with the structural conditions. Because ultimately, you can make class sizes as small as you want. You can make schools have as many books and as lavish as you'd like. You can make your school like fucking Degrassi, like straight with complete with Drake there. But ultimately, if your kid's coming to school hungry, like, he won't be able to learn. If your kid is concerned about whether or not like he's gonna have a home to go back to, or if there's gonna be heat there, they can't learn. And so trying to decontextualize the environment, the total social environment and material environment in which people are expected to educate themselves is it's a fool's game. It's very easy to say, well, this guy goes to a nice school, why is he failing? Well, it's because his father was arrested like last week for smoking marijuana, and now he's never like that. That's just like the reality is that a lot of these families in these neighborhoods, like, they don't provide conducive learning experiences. They have very little to do with the school itself sometimes.
And nationally, we have a very confusing system where you can end up in prison in one state for 25 to life for pot, and another one you could be making a multi-million fortune, in another state. So that's awfully confusing for folks to wrap their heads around morally and ethically.
Yeah, but I agree a little bit with Brandon, but I also want to push back on a little bit, Brandon. I mean, like, yeah, we can talk about the problems structurally in neighborhoods and the problems at home and things along those lines. But when you get right down to it, schools that are funded do better than schools that aren't.
Of course.
But it's both and. So, yeah, it is. It is both and. But, like, when we're talking about spending 54% of our discretionary budget on the military, and we don't have class sizes conducive to learning in any of the public schools that we have across the country, we've got a problem. And it's an imbalance in this country with how we allocate our resources.
It definitely is. I would say I'm less concerned with, but I am concerned with, obviously, the way we allocate our resources in terms of military budget versus education budget. Like, that speaks to our priorities. But more concerning is the fact that education budget is often tied to property taxes.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Because that's the bigger issue in terms of how it perpetuates the cycle of poverty.
Or the lottery. The lottery doesn't help either. That it's tied to the lottery either, which is often a poverty tax as well.
Yeah.
Like a way to tax people who
and the way they do the lottery. And the way they do the lottery tax in Rhode Island is what they've done for the past 10 years is every time the lottery makes, X budget amount, they cut the school budget by X and say, okay, we're going to rely on this lottery money. And then the next year, well, what happens? Lottery money might come in at X -5. You don't know. But at the same time, they're still cutting the budget every year and relying on lottery money and lottery increases.
Or in Washington's case, they just divert it to other funds anyway. But yeah, continue.
Right.
It's easier to confuse the cycle. Like, for me,
because I agree with what this entire panel said, because I think we're each hitting on different aspects of what's going on. Because Brandon's right. It's hard to. It's impossible to. Not, I won't say impossible, but it's very hard to succeed at school when you go home and you don't have anything to eat, or you go home and you're being abused, or you go home and you see nothing but violence in your neighborhood. Right? Like that. It's hard to overcome those barriers. It's very difficult. It's a lot easier to fall into gangbanging and selling drugs if you're from a neighborhood, even if you're going to a great school. If you're from a neighborhood where that's what's going on, that's what you're indoctrinated with, that's what's happening, it's an easy trap to fall into. But at the same time, we have to fund schools in these neighborhoods. We have to make education something that people want to do. The number of people that you go to, the number of gangbangers that you can go up and talk to and be like, and just have a conversation. Sometimes people are like, I just was not engaged in school. They did not care about what was going on with the individual students. The class sizes were, too big. Teachers are one of our first lines of defense when we talk about societal change. A teacher in a classroom can have such a profound effect on a student's life, but we don't give them the means to do this. We put them in classes with 30 and 40 students and say, figure it out. We put them in classes with that many people. We don't even fund them to have their classroom stocked. Students can't get school supplies. Kids are going hungry at lunch. Kids are going hungry at home. It's such a complex and interwoven issue.
And not only that,
there's no one strategy to get rid of it.
And not only that, this is not me shitting on teachers, because I think that teachers have, an important role in our society, one of the most important roles in our society. But a lot of teachers are also woefully unprepared to teach. and we in a lot of ways, the way we teach students is, well, not a lot of ways, our school system is reflective of our society's values. And we talk a lot about police brutality in terms of racism, but we don't talk about is the school system as another like racist structure that exists within Black communities, another neo-colonial structure that exists in Black communities, because a lot of it's the same thing. Just like we bust in police officers from New Jersey to police Brooklyn and the Bronx and Black neighborhoods. We bust in teachers from out of these neighborhoods to also teach these students. I dated a lot of teachers for some reason. I don't know why. And a lot of them were white women, or at least non-Black people of color, and who live in Harlem and taught in the Bronx. And the cultural gap between them and the teacher and them, them and their students rather, was always like something that like they talked to me about or they struggled with. One woman I dated lived in Harlem. Nice woman. Great. She just could not understand the kind of cultural differences in help seeking that Black people have from white people. And like she couldn't understand why her students would not seek help from her. And I was like, oh, that's not a Black thing to do. It's just like help seeking is not something that is encouraged in our community the same way it might be encouraged in a white community. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, it's like,
but here's another issue.
I would say, whenever I think about help seeking the Black community, I think about this one quote from Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, where it's just like, where the woman, this is a great quote, where the woman's like, therapy, when you're Black, you either help yourself or you find Jesus.
Yep.
And I'm like, she's not lying. She's not lying.
But like, here's one of the things, because I was just reading an article on this the other day, actually. It's the lack of Black male teachers, right? Like just for a lot of us, we don't I never thought about it until I read that article, but I only had one Black male teacher in 12 years of the entire time I was in K-12. I only had 4 male teachers as a whole. Like, so for me, there was not a lot of people that I felt comfortable going and talking to as a Black youth, as a Black male youth that was dealing with certain issues. So that's one of the things, that's one of the ways that we could actually start promoting equity, is we could get more Black teachers, especially more Black male teachers, into some of these schools. But Brandon's also right. A lot of teachers are woefully unprepared, and some of that is coming from different states. I believe it was proposed here in Washington State that they wanted to let just anybody teach. Like, you didn't need a teaching certificate, you didn't need a degree in education, you didn't need an undergraduate or graduate degree in education. You could just, like, if you wanted to teach, go right on ahead. And that's going to screw with the students. But I think that goes back to funding schools. That goes back to doing, because we fund schools to do teacher outreach, to go and recruit good teachers. If we pay teachers a decent wage, you're going to have more people that want to get into teaching. But we also have to be very aware of the cultural differences between our students and our educators. To be 100% real with you, a white teacher is not going to understand everything that a student of color is going through. A Black teacher is not always going to understand what an Asian student is going through. And somebody not from your neighborhood, or a neighborhood that's very similar, someone who doesn't know what that struggle is, cannot come in and then suddenly just change the world. Like, that's not how this works. And that's another issue with some of these teachers. A lot of them do have these savior complexes. I see so many people that want, like, oh, I just want to go teach in an underprivileged Black neighborhood. I just want to save these little Black children.
So you're saying Freedom Writers was not a documentary? Did I get that confused?
Wasn't it though? Wasn't that a documentary? Wasn't it like a doc? Wasn't that like based on a true story?
It was based on a true story, but it's been fetishized, right? Like, there's this fetishization.
What about Love and Basketball? Is that based on a true story too?
What?
What about Love and Basketball? Is that based on a true story too?
Shut the hell up.
I always forget.
But like, I'm just there trying to look for that conversation where, so I've got hairs in places I've never had before, and I can't talk to my female teachers about it.
No, it's more.
It was like real talk. Some of the concerns I had were about the gangs in my neighborhood and being pressured to join a gang, or being pressured to sell drugs, or witnessing acts of violence in my community, be they drive-bys, be they people getting shot up. On my bus, people routinely got the shit beat out of them and physically thrown out of one of the emergency exits. Like, this kind of violence, I couldn't go to one of my white teachers who was not from this area and be like, hey, I'm being pressured into joining this gang and I don't know what to do. Because her response is to call the police, and that gets my ass beat every single day.
Snitch.
So you have to become a mark.
No, but the thing is too, like, and so we also see the way this is reflected in, you know, in the intersection between policing in schools, right? So we know that people from outside these neighborhoods, we know that there is this perception by teachers who lack this kind of cultural sensitivity training that Black students behave worse. That Black students, you know, appear more dangerous, appear more adult. Specifically, I want to say specifically Black girls behave more, you know, are viewed as more adult and more disrespectful than white women when you don't correct for implicit racism, and that has such, you know, dangerous implications for the school to prison pipeline.